What really happened to the Mars exploration rover opportunity is not what the news is telling you. It is absolutely imperative that the truth about what happened to Oppie and what followed be relayed to the public. To hell with laws and protocol. I was part of the team designated within NASA to track the movements of the Mars exploration rover opportunity, or more aptly named, Oppie. I am here to tell you that you have been lied to. Oppie did not simply expire due to some ill-conceived dust storm like you have been told. Although, I would much rather that be the case. But once again, that is a farce. Our mission was dedicated to the exploration of our neighbor, the Red Planet. To say the least, I was honored to be a part of humanity's ascension to the last frontier. I felt elated and even godlike. How many people could honestly say they were doing something bigger than their mundane lives? At the end of my day, the answer to that question did not matter to me. The only thing that mattered was what lay beyond our atmosphere. But being a part of that meant uncovering things we had no business meddling in. I remember standing over Maria's shoulders. Her long brown hair was draped behind her ears with expensive-looking headphones. She was staring intensely at the computer screen in front of her. We started picking this up around 0958 Sulu. I have no idea what this is. Oppie was located there. She nodded towards the giant screens at the front of the floor. It seems to get louder as Oppie moves south. This doesn't sound like any sort of weather anomaly to me, and we've been analyzing it. Maria gestured to her own computer screen at the audio waves. There seems to be a source. Her voice shook slightly. She passed me her headphones and I precariously put them over my ears. Maybe I would hear the rumblings of tectonic plates shifting, but I was not sure what to expect. Maria pressed play. Low, echoing octaves were traveling around Oppie. It sounded like a deep voice humming eerily, almost like some sort of chant. But no, that was ridiculous. This was not a voice. Mars was dead, so what silly type of conclusion was that? Maria was staring at me with her wide, almond-shaped eyes, attempting to anticipate my thoughts. I passed back her headphones and straightened my back. "It sounds creepy, right?" she inquired, a little too loudly. I cleared my throat. It is certainly unusual. It suddenly occurred to me that I had the entire watch floor's attention. Had I been the last person to listen to this? I instructed Maria to forward the recording to an acoustic engineer team we had stationed in an effort to provide us with a rash and logical explanation. I have taken the liberty to upload what I was able to get my hands on. How long has Oppie been picking up this anomaly? The anomaly is what we had come to address it as. For the past 5 hours, Maria answered promptly. It's been getting louder. Pull up Oppie's path. I gestured towards the screen. Immediately, a gray-scale satellite map of Mars filled the display. Small, blue tick marks annotated Oppie's travels along the terrain. Oppie was currently located in the Kronos 15 quadrant, an area of rocky land. We've been leading Oppie on the eastward path towards the cliffs on the far side of K-15, one of the terrain analysts explained. I had already been aware. My superiors had given me that directive to pass to them. I debriefed my chief within the hour on the anomaly. If I was being honest with myself, Maria was right. It did sound creepy. Follow the sound. I relayed the order. It had been what my superiors wanted. An intense bout of curiosity overwhelmed me, mixed with a barely contained veil of excitement. I received several looks of satisfaction and wonder when I passed down the order. The only one who appeared as though they wanted to protest was Maria. She was a quiet little mouse, always kept to herself, dutifully listening to any sounds or signals that might be of interest to the agency. She opened her mouth to say something, but abruptly shut it. Now, it took longer than we would have liked to find the source of the mysterious sound. It's common knowledge that MER-1 has a speed of less than 1/4 of a mile. In the 15 years that Oppie had been active, our little explorer had traveled about 28 miles, an incredible feat. The mission was only supposed to last 90 days, but went far beyond than expected. An anomaly was captured on the rim of the Endeavor crater, right along Marathon Valley. It was a few days later that we received a distant video of the source. There had been dust and sand particles, what we assumed to be the dust storm, but it was not a natural occurrence as we had originally thought. What is that? My voice shook with wonder as the entire watch floor stared at the screen, attempting to make out what Oppie had sent back. The video was grainy. Red swirls of sand pervaded the screen, making it a bit difficult to make out at first glance. But as my eyes adjusted, my mind began to comprehend what it was I was looking at. A single source of green light emanated powerfully through the dust from some sort of structure hundreds of feet from Oppie. The light seemed to be pulsating, kicking up the sand, essentially creating its own isolated dust storm. We directed Oppie to move forward. We wanted a closer look. Excitement tingled through the air as Oppie steadily approached at a much slower rate than normal. The wind was becoming powerful. Were we on the verge of encountering alien life for the first time? I stared at the screen with my arms crossed tightly over my chest. It looks sort of like some sort of obelisk, I said slowly before I could stop the words from tumbling out. But I was right. The obelisk in question appeared slightly taller than the average man. It was wider, though, and had to be made up of some sort of grayish metallic material. It slowly became clear that the green light glowed from some sort of Sanskrit or cuneiform writing etched onto the obelisk. Oppie came to a halt, angling its camera up towards the monument. It was just a few feet away with a much clearer view now. The writing was written in some sort of language that none of us obviously recognized. There was something else, though. To the left was some sort of picture carving. It could only be described as some writhing mass of tentacles. I have not been able to acquire Oppie's visual logs. Their classification level was elevated far above mine before I had a chance to take them. I apologize. But It was fascinating. Never had any human discovered the markings of an ancient civilization on a completely different planet. We were staring at the screen, awestruck by our discovery. Theories ran through my head at rapid speed. Was this tentacled creature some sort of god to the Martians of old? The anomaly was booming through our loudspeakers, and now we had proof it was coming from this strange obelisk on Mars. All of the team leads gathered in an office to explain what was happening to our superiors. Snapshots were sent of the ancient language to world-renowned linguists, and we waited with bated breath on what information we would get back. I was standing on the watch floor, smiling and laughing with my teammates about how we would be heroes and rich people because of this. I was sipping a hot cup of green tea when the directive came down to attempt to extract a sample from the obelisk. Maria's eyebrows were deeply furrowed. "Is something wrong?" I asked her hesitantly, glancing between her and the screen. I was hoping she would not answer. I did not want to miss a thing. I was feeling giddy, like some school kid finding out that school was canceled and we had a snow day. I was right where I wanted to be. "It's just that I was speaking to one of the linguists that we brought in," she began to explain, "and he said that the markings on the obelisk were actually ancient Sumerian." The room was crowded now, full of scientists, engineers, among many others, all of us watching as someone guided Oppie to touch the obelisk. I snorted. "That's not possible. He was probably making it up to mess with you. Gullible people are easily susceptible to conspiracies." She glared at me. "I thought the same thing," she hissed, lowering her voice. "Let me show you." I rolled my eyes, preparing to move away, but she grabbed my forearm and dragged me to her workstation. She unlocked her computer and Googled ancient Sumerian. My hands were on my hips, with a contemptuous expression. "Look!" Maria swung her computer screen. "I don't know. It looks similar at a glance, I suppose. It seems far-fetched, don't you think?" Before Maria had a chance to form a rebuttal, someone in the crowd gasped. My head snapped up just in time to see Oppie's visuals blacked back from a cloud of green plasma energy just as the claw touched the obelisk. It landed several feet away on its side. The camera was now angled horribly. The tip of the obelisk could be seen in Oppie's bottom right-hand corner. The frequency of its glowing pulses accelerated. Oppie's camera was moving in and out of focus, making everything far more hazy than they already were. A violent tremor vibrated underneath the little rover as a seemingly final pulse blasted from the obelisk. Oppie's screens went black on June 10th, 2018. There was a great panic, of course. Everything was done to resuscitate Oppie, but nothing worked. We tried for months, but we never got it back online. Everyone was scrambling over each other, trying to understand what happened. Everyone was questioned by an outside agency, and I had no idea who. Those in the room that had the necessary clearance were either shut out or brought in further into the fold. This was clearly something alien. The obelisk had not been built by humans, but by Martians. I was dying to know what was going on, but I had been shut out, and Maria had been brought in. When Maria pulled me aside in the middle of the hallway, she double-checked to make sure no one was in the vicinity. "Another obelisk was found on Earth, in Guatemala." My stomach dropped. More questions than answers now, and it was driving me crazy. "What?" She waited until a few people passed us, darting nervous looks to the back of their heads. There was an earthquake a few months ago, on the same day Oppie touched the obelisk. Some locals found a cave opening that I guess opened up due to the shake. We sent people to the area a couple months ago to investigate. A contact of mine said that an American agency moved into the excavation site. I tried to reach out to them and the locals, but I've heard nothing for weeks. Who told you this? The words stumbled out. It all sounded crazy. Maria hesitated. He was at the excavation site. He would send me updates as they dug deeper, but like I said, I haven't heard anything in weeks. The worry in her voice was apparent. Maria gave me a final look before taking down the hallway and leaving me dumbstruck. The shock was quickly wearing off, and this intense need to know what exactly was happening overcame me. I had seen the same feeling in the depths of Maria's eyes. I felt like every cell of mine was on fire. The pit of my stomach felt like it was constantly on the loop of a roller coaster. This terrible, aching curiosity followed me home. My palms had not stopped sweating with anticipation. I was sitting at my desk in the living room, gazing at my computer screen at the one-way tickets to Guatemala, while contemplating wild theories more ridiculous than the next. What if our creators had come from Mars and passed on the gift of writing to the Sumerians thousands of years ago? What if they left behind ways for us to contact them? If so, they wanted us to find them. Maybe we had forerunners from another planet and our home planet was not actually Earth. Were we just a forgotten colony or some sort of experiment? I called Maria. She had already booked a ticket for tomorrow morning. I promptly did the same, packed a bag full of essentials, and met Maria at the airport the following day. We both were filled with that burning, unnatural need to just know, and we did not look back once we boarded that plane. My running theory was that the Mars Exploration Rover opportunity electronically activated some sort of beacon, the obelisk, that in turn activated another one on Earth. Most people brushed it off as aftertremors of the volcano that erupted that year, but the initiated knew better. Maria and I arrived in Guatemala and immediately set about finding her contact. She made several calls via WhatsApp, but he did not answer. "How do you know about this?" I asked, staring over her shoulder at her computer screen as I used to before. We had booked a hotel in Guatemala City and I used it as a base camp while we figured out where the earthly obelisk lay. "Alex is a security contractor. He told me he was out here guarding some camp for excavators who had found the obelisk. He said there was a green light coming from a cave that they were digging into." She was typing away rapidly on her laptop as she spoke. I backed away, sitting down on my bed, and took a deep breath. We had been there for a week now, digging around for any sort of evidence, but nothing. I laid back, letting my feet dangle over the bed, and stared at the spinning fan above. "I found him!" I sat up a little too fast, staring at the back of Maria's head. "How?" She turned around, dangling an arm over the chair. "Alex and I used to date," she began sheepishly. "One night, he logged into my MacBook and never logged off. His last known location came up." I ignored my moral hiccups on that and we were off. I will not reveal the location of the excavation site, but we did find it in the end. We would not have been able to do it without Maria there to translate. I cursed myself for not committing myself to learning Spanish in my college years. Our Jeep managed to get us as far as a remote village 12 miles away from the site. If you have ever traveled to a third world country beneath the United States southern border, I mean really traveled, then you can already imagine what this village looked like. It was nothing like Cancun. This was a village in the middle of a jungle. It was a wonder that Alex, the contractor, received any signal way out here, because I had none on my phone. The metal sheets that held the shacks of the village were rusted in some places, which was to be expected in a humid jungle environment like that. An old woman was sitting in a rocking chair on a makeshift wooden porch, listening to some Spanish radio. A white, spotted mutt lay right beside her with its eyes closed. Sweat dripped down the back of my neck and I was constantly swatting mosquitoes away, but this woman, with all her wrinkles, seemed content. The village smelled of burnt wood, I thought. Maria explained that the people way down south burned their trash. There was no garbage men that came by to pick up people's trash in their garbage trucks, like we had back in the States. These people had to make do another way. White smokestacks of burnt garbage seemed to surround the village. A large truck that clearly did not belong sat on the edge of town. It was her grandson we spoke with. He was lanky and wore a dirty white tank top. He was darker than Maria. A machete leaned against the stairs to the porch. No deben ir. ¿Por qué? Maria answered back. I stared back and forth between them as they conversed in a language I did not understand. His body language seemed to convey a sense of urgency, almost like he was pleading. "What's he saying?" I asked. "He says we should stay away from the site." Maria snapped at me. "That there was a cave-in. Apparently the Americans triggered it." She turned back. She asked another question in Spanish. More answers, more questions. Fear in only one half of the conversation and exasperation in another. Maria was the latter. A moment of silence passed and she spoke again, pleading this time. The young man glanced around anxiously as though Maria did not understand a lick of Spanish. He looked like he wanted to yell at her for a split second, but he took a deep breath and spoke evenly. Then, he said something else and gestured for us to follow him, taking care to bring his machete with him. Chickens clucked and moved rapidly out of the way as we tailed him. Around the back of the house, say, a leaning metal shack, he opened the door. "Pantelos," he commanded, gesturing inside. Inside, there were a few white biohazard suits. What were they doing with these? How had a poor village like this come to acquire these suits? None of it made sense. "He says we should put them on. A truck, probably that big one over there, came through when the excavation first arrived and stayed in the village while they worked. They never came back for it and the villagers decided to open it up. These suits were there, along with a bunch of medical supplies." "How come they never came back for it?" I blurted. I gazed at them, arching my head. They were rather bulky. I reached for one, but tossed it aside. There were red specks inside one of them and I didn't want to think too hard about. "This is what we're here to find out. And to locate Alex," Maria added. The logical side of my brain was starting to clear through the fog of the burning, aching curiosity. This was crazy. Why were we delving into a jungle for an alien artifact that a person and likely several others had disappeared over? It was beyond stupid. This was not a government-sanctioned investigation. This was a couple of imbeciles going on some ridiculous adventure quest. Nevertheless, Maria and I put on the suits, and she smiled at me. The Guatemalan and several other men led us to a dirt road on the outskirts of the village. Quite a few smoking piles littered the area. He says that the Americans paved this road. It will lead us to the excavation site, Maria said with thinly veiled excitement. We moved forward, but a hand clasped my wrist. It was a man, the man we had been speaking to. Toma, el humo te puede ayudar. Maria was already on her way back to the jeep in a hurry. I could not let her go by herself. I slipped what he had given me into my backpack, even though I had no idea what his words meant. We climbed into the jeep and took off. Just like everything else, I was not sure what to expect. Maria eased the jeep through the campsite. There were white tents and no one in sight that I could see. We hopped out of the vehicle. Even through the stifling plastic suits, the silence was somehow deafening. Not a leaf moved in the air like it had in the village. No songbirds chirped cheerily around us. It was deathly quiet. Maria slammed her door shut and I jumped. "Will you please do your best to be quiet?" I hissed at her angrily. She rolled her eyes. "There's no one around." She threw her arms up. "Then why are the trucks still here?" I kept my voice low, but could not stop the irritation from seeping through. I thought this girl was smart, but I was starting to suspect otherwise. She ignored my comment. "In case you weren't aware, you're not my team leader anymore, so you can take that stick up your ass and shove it down your throat." Maria pushed past me, speed walking through the site. I followed, trying to stifle a rebuttal. It was like she paid no mind to the tatters of biohazard suits or the assault rifles abandoned on the thick, muddy earth. I glimpsed a splatter of blood and tripped over some sort of large, cannon-like contraption. I smacked right into Maria. "There it is!" she gasped. Just ahead of us there was an enormous mesh of boulders piled over the mouth of the cave. My eyes darted left and right. Were those explosive charges by that tent over there? I surmised that this was not a natural cave-in. "Maria," I cautioned, but she began sprinting forward. "I have to know." She reached the cave-in before I did. Every single fiber of what made me human was screaming for me to run. I could only watch with dread as Maria scaled the boulders. She tried to pry a rock loose, but when it would not budge, she climbed higher. "Maria, this is not safe. We should leave." My brain was firing off warnings every second that went by. She should not be near those rocks. We should not be there. Maria managed to heft one loose, creating a small gap into the cave. Immediately, something small and red shot out from the hole, striking Maria's face. She let out a shriek and fell back from her perch with a sickening crunch. She lay face up with her left leg bent at an odd angle. A chilling, deep sigh escaped through the gap, but my brain had not registered it due to the fact that Maria started convulsing for a moment. I sprinted forward, sliding on my knees to her, about to lift her torso, but I froze. There were 3 holes in her faceplate. 3 spiked red spores were embedded in the flesh of her face. One was stuck in her cheek, another one on the corner of her left eye, and the third on the corner of her chin. and they seemed to be trying to burrow in. It was then that I realized that those spikes were starting to wriggle. Maria's hands slapped up against her faceplate in desperation. Tears were streaming down her face, her shrieks piercing my ears. The spore near her eye was moving. A tendril flicked over her eye, seemed to elongate, pulled at the corner of her eye and forced its way inside. Maria's shrieks turned into inhuman screams of pain that I will never forget as the spore climbed up her chin and into her gaping mouth. The other simply kept digging into her cheek, spurting blood all over her face. I scrambled back, terrified. Then, her screams turned into distinctive moans of pleasure. Yes! Maria's face split into a smile of pure ecstasy. The blood vessels in her eyes popped, turning the whites of her eyes into Mars reds. I know everything. Her skin seemed to bubble and morph as she turned on her side to look at me. Another voice echoed from the dark cave behind her.
Join us,
it rumbled, shaking the earth around me. It was deep.
For I am your God. I am your peace.
Maria stood up, towering over me on her broken leg. It snapped back into place as the spores spread through her body. Her eyes were wide.
Alex is inside and he understands. He can see just as I can see.
Her voice was distorted and fanatical. She choked slightly and her skin stretched. Thin, long tentacles slithered out of her eyes as her skin reddened and she stumbled towards me with her arms up to the heavens.
It's come to save us. It was trapped by that beacon, but we've rescued it, and now it will save us just like it did for us before.
She gurgled my name.
Let it inside you.
Oh fuck. I scrambled back on my ass, but luckily she was slow and shaky. Sharp, tentacle-like claws had grown from her hands and poked out of her suit. She was a monstrosity. My hand smacked against the device that I had tripped over. My head flashed back to what the Guatemalan had given me. Matches. But this was a flamethrower. I had grabbed it and squeezed the trigger. Intense heat erupted from the end and fire engulfed Maria. No screams from her came. She just fell back and crumpled into ashes. Much faster than I thought possible. The ground shook again.
I will consume this planet,
it promised angrily as I ran for the tent with the charges. I do not know if I believe in a higher power, but that thing inside that cave was not God. Something had to have been on my side when I grabbed the explosives and managed to hurl it into the gap just as a fine, lazy mist of spores began to pour out. Maybe it was just luck, but the explosion that I set off made the cave-in a lot worse. I stood there, shaking, staring at Maria's burnt body. She had died with a sweet smile on her face, twisted by whatever evolution those spores had induced. She died happy. Her body eventually crumbled into ashes. I stood there for a long time, staring at the cave and shaking with the flamethrower in my hand, but no voice came from it again. I cried uncontrollably as I drove back. There was nothing else to do. This was the reason that NASA and the rest of the government had abandoned that excavation site. I do not have all the answers, but these are my theories. That beacon on Mars activated another on Earth when Oppie touched it. Maybe it was as a warning not to approach it. I never found out what the Sumerian had translated to, but I can only assume it was some type of warning about an all-knowing, tentacled creature that spread through red spores, infecting life as we know it. Maybe there was another one on Mars, and it woke up the thing that had slumbered beneath our planet. Perhaps those beacons are there to keep it locked away, but when we excavated the site, we dug too deep and let it out. Some of the villagers had deduced that smoke or fire can keep it at bay. I figured that was what that plasma field on Mars was for. But how the fuck would I ever find out? Those red specks I saw in that suit was the one that Maria had put on. Those spores were a lot smaller, and she had inhaled them. While the smoke in the village was in my lungs, the spores in that suit had urged her on and fogged her thought process. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but it's the only thing that makes sense. Fire in any form keeps it away. It kills it. Maybe Earth was constantly fighting it with all those volcano eruptions we have been having lately. At least 200 people died when the Volcán de Fuego in Guatemala erupted. The volcano in Hawaii flowed steadily for years into the ocean. I could still hear its words. It said it was our God, and maybe it was, even though I seriously doubted that. I am a heavy smoker now. I hate the color red. I cry about Maria every other week. The details about what happened after do not actually matter. Do you really care about how I was questioned over Maria's disappearance? As soon as I mentioned the obelisk in Guatemala and how I had somehow managed to close it up even tighter, they relented. Something happened on Mars that killed every living thing on it. That's what I think. The tentacled monster carved onto the obelisk on Mars flashed in my head every single day. I imagined it was enormous and could cover the entire sky if it ate enough. I hope the day never comes that we find out. But somewhere in the back of my mind, no matter how many cigarettes I smoke, is that aching need to know.